And welcome back. Joining us in studio this morning is the Minister of Agriculture and Food Security, my good friend Jose Abelardo Mai.
Good morning,
sir.
Good morning to both of you. Good morning, Belize.
How's it been going?
A lot of work, keeping busy and keeping out of trouble, I guess.
I know the past few days you've been busy showing the Minister of Agriculture from El Salvador, your ministerial counterpart, Belize and what Belize has to offer where certain aspects of agriculture are concerned. Let's start there. This, I understand, was a sort of a reciprocal visit. You went to El Salvador recently, and an invitation was extended for him to come over and see what we're doing in our agro-productive industry. Let's start there.
That is absolutely right. Plan Belize, a part of Plan Belize, a very important component of Plan Belize was that we would expand our trade relations with Central America and CARICOM. So when we were elected to government and appointed as Minister of Agriculture, one of the first things was how can we expand trade? And then you look at Central America and then you look at all the data provided and realize that a country like El Salvador with 6.5 million, almost 7 million people, do import a lot of food. I think 85 to 90% of what they consume is imported from different parts in Central America, different countries, Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala. And I say, well, why not Belize?
Yeah.
We are a country that are self-sufficient in many of the staple foods we eat. And we, at times, can have surplus. And so I said, this, I believe, is a win-win situation for us. So we began by visiting El Salvador and visiting the markets, physically visiting the markets, Salvador, looking at commodities, identifying commodities that we believe we have a competitive edge on. And we identified a number of commodities, and we started the discussion with the ministers of trade. They have ministers of agriculture. They have changed, I think, 4 ministers of agriculture since President Bukele took over. So it has been a little challenging for us, but nevertheless, this minister who visited us is convinced that there are commodities that we can supply their people with. And we identified products, and they have already did their risk assessment to see that from animal and plant health aspect that we are okay. But more so the plant health. So they did that study already. And then in my last visit to El Salvador, they expressed interest in us producing one of their main staples, which is beans. They consume a very small kidney beans. We call it red kidney beans, the smaller, dark red beans. And they also consume a lot of white corn.
Yeah.
And they were saying to us, we have this availability, we have the seed available for this variety, and we will probably consider giving you, the farmers, the seed. You grow the seed for us, you can give us back for us to plant, and you can commercially produce beans for us. So we are working on that right now, and also white corn. El Salvador consumes a lot of white corn for their human consumption. We produce very little white corn, mainly yellow corn, for animal consumption. So while 80% of our corn is for animal consumption, 90% of corn is for their human consumption.
consumption.
Yeah. Let's go back a bit. In terms of this agreement between Belize and El Salvador to look into the possibility of growing this particular variety of beans for them, that has to go through all the phytosanitary controls and all of these other things to ensure that what we're bringing in from them is something that may not necessarily affect adversely what we have presently in Belize, right?
There is, to my knowledge, no major pest and disease of quarantine importance that affects beans in El Salvador and that may affect us in Belize. So it's a low risk to me, but I'm speaking from my knowledge, Baja is the competent authority to be able to give us greater detail on that. But to my knowledge, so it would not be a serious problem. Now, if you're talking of importing beans from Asia, some country in Asia, or rice from India, then that's something that we have to be very, very carefully analyzed from that standpoint, right? But Guatemala, Salvador, Nicaragua, we tend to have a very well control of the pests and diseases in the area. And if there is a high risk, then there has to be a lot of analysis being done and measures taken. But so far as I know, there's no major pest and disease in beans that we may be very concerned about.
Let's talk about the benefits that could be inherited with forming this trade agreement with El Salvador.
Whenever a country can export its product, it's always a win situation for them. We are a very small populated country. Whatever we produce, we can saturate our market quickly, easily. So we have to think of exports. Export to the US, export to the Caribbean, export to Central America. Now, and any country that is self-sufficient in the basic foods they eat is a country in a very good position. And although we may think that inflation is very high in Belize, as we feel, because inflation is real, we are always better off when we produce our food compared to other countries. I want to make this, whenever you compare your country, try to compare to the best, not to the worst. So it'd be unfair for me to compare Belize's inflation rate with Argentina, for example, which is so much 100%. But in Central America, we have the third lowest inflation rate. In the Caribbean, I think we have the second lowest. Simply because we produce most of what we consume in terms of food. What would you find in a restaurant on any given day, Belize? You will find rice, you will find beans, you will find poultry, chicken, and you will find little vegetables. Each of those products that's in your plate is produced in your country. Now, compare to Guatemala. What would you find in their plate? You will find black beans, which they import a lot. You will find corn tortillas, which they are the largest importers of corn. You will find beef, which they import from us a lot. And you will find the little vegetables that they produce. Compare the CARICOM. Look at what they eat and look at what they import. That is what causes the inflation, because inflation is imported. So when we can produce what we consume, we can manage to a certain extent our inflation. So it is false to say that we have no inflation in Belize. We have, but other countries are far worse off than we in Belize.
Let's look at an example here, just to perhaps expand and illustrate better for our audience. Sabrina and I had a conversation earlier where she was mentioning that the cost per pound of cilantro, for instance, is at $15 at present. What are some of the inputs that go into agriculture that the farmer has to be able to have the money to put in? Perhaps it's seeds, fertilizer, fuel, and so on and so forth, that
let me
cumulatively affect the cost of the end product.
If I could avoid buying cilantro, especially at $15, I would do so. No Belizean needs to buy cilantro at $15 a pound. Because cilantro, you throw the seed and it comes out. But cilantro has a hard seed coat. And this year, because I was looking at that, cilantro, all you do is throw it on the ground, you know, and cover it with a little bit of soil. It takes long to germinate, especially if the soil is dry. It has a hard seed coat. But this year, the cilantro seed that was imported I understand, was not good quality. So it never germinated. And so there was a scarcity of cilantro. It was nothing, and there's no big field of cilantro. You know. There's maybe a 1/4 of this building is planted in cilantro, 1/4 of what you're sitting in. It's not like you have acres and hectares of cilantro. It's not like that. So if you grow one 5-foot row of cilantro in 1 5-foot row, this, you have enough cilantro for what you want. So no Belizean should supposed to be buying cilantro at $15 a pound under normal circumstances. The seed was not good, I'm told, and that's why there was a scarcity of cilantro. And the law of supply and demand always exists. Right?
Drives up costs.
But I mean, if I had the choice, no man, I would not buy cilantro at $15 a pound. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You could plant it in your backyard under normal circumstances.
To the question though, in terms of inputs, like let's remove cilantro out of the picture. Let's look at any other crop that is being planted and serviced. What are some of the inputs that at the end of the day, the farmer has to collect that back in terms of what he has invested in?
Very interesting question. Well, one of the main factors that cause the cost to increase is one, fuel. Especially if it is a commodity that requires much transport. For example, sugarcane. The highest cost of producing sugarcane, you know what it is? We did analysis.
Trucking it to the mill?
Interest rate on loans and transportation. You call it the cut. Cut, load, and transport. But transport itself is the most expensive. The interest rate and the transport. Now, in a vegetable case, transport is always there. But you will recall 1 year ago, the cost of fertilizer went up by 300%.
Yeah.
Agro inputs went up by 120%. If you are a farmer in the north where you need to irrigate, your pumping cost goes up because of fuel. You use fuel. Farmers have converted their gasoline motors to butane to try to reduce that cost. But those are the main factors that make your costs increase. Also the cost of seed. And I want you to do that exercise. Actually, they sell you a seed, you know. If you want a tomato seed, you can buy one seed. So they go to the store and literally count 1, 2, 3, 4, and 150 seed. Plants. You get a seed, and the cost of seed just went up crazy. So all this leads to increase in cost of production. And of course, the risk. The farmer takes the biggest risk. You know that when you go to the store and you buy seed doesn't have import duty or GST, but it does have environmental tax. When you buy your seed, you run the risk that that seed, one, may not germinate.
Just about
Two,
to say.
after it germinates and it's 4 inches tall, an insect may eat it. Thirdly, if the insect did not eat it, heavy rainfall comes and physically kills the plant. If that doesn't happen, then the bacteria gets in and damages the plant. So the farmer has done all this investment, risking that he will not even see that plant produce and sell. So farming is a risk. And that risk now has increased with climate change. So the farmers take all the risks. So there's a cost for risk, you know.
Yeah.
Especially now with climate change. Now the consumer doesn't want to hear that, and I don't, and I agree with them. As a consumer, they care less what risk the farmer is taking.
Yeah.
Right? They want tomato and they want it at 50 cents a pound, as cheap as they can. Right? But we have to be fair with the farmer. I'm not justifying these high costs and exaggerated gouging costs, right? But the costs are real. And we have to be mindful that food security is not food security anymore if it is unaffordable. So the farmers have to understand that, and the consumer have to understand that the farmer has cost. But many times, the farmer always get the lowest part of the profit. There are so many people in between that when that product reaches the final consumer, these people, they make the large margins. The farmer stays with the lowest margin.
So how do we control then or manage the supply chain in terms of going from the fields or the farms to the consumer? If you have all these other middlemen, so to speak, who are jacking up the price.
It is always a challenge. It is always a challenge because trade is trade. And it's not only here that exists. I mean, it exists all over the world. There's no easy fix to it. I mean, that's why there was what we referred to many years ago, the concept of farmer's market, where the farmer brings his product and put it in the market himself. But the experiences of that show that when a farmer starts to market, then he stops being a farmer and dedicates himself to marketing. So it becomes very complicated. It sounds easy. Make the farmer go sell it out there himself. Avoid all the middlemen. But middlemen play a very important role in the economy too. So we have to be mindful of that these people make a living out of that. So if you eliminate them, then what will they do? So everybody has a part, a role to play in the distribution of growing and distribution of food. But it is how you manage it.
Yeah. Minister, as the Minister for Food Security, you speak heavily on how these agricultural products come to be. We spoke about how persons shouldn't have to be purchasing cilantro for $15 a pound because you can grow it yourself. Would you say a way that consumers could maybe deal with the inflation situation is to also create their own food and create sustainable
Absolutely. We discussed this in cabinet, and I mentioned to my colleagues, especially from Belize City, that there is absolutely no reason why someone who lives in the city cannot grow his own food. I made the analogy to the Minister of Salvador. I said, you have 6.5 million Salvadoranians. If each Salvadorian would produce 1 pound of tomato, that's 6.5 million pounds of tomatoes, right?
There'd be a glut on the market.
Right. 1 pound. If we have, 60,000 residents in the city, and you say 20% of, 20% of that, or 30% would produce one cabbage. How much cabbage would that be? So there's no reason why we cannot produce. And I said to them that I am prepared, the Ministry of Agriculture is prepared to work with the ministers and area reps that we could do probably gardens, city gardens, but we need the best way to control inflation is to produce your own food. We can put all the legislation in place and employ all the people to police the stores. That will never solve a problem. It will control, but the best thing is to produce your own food. The Japanese are very good at this. They, in their offices, have vegetables growing. When they're outside of the corridor, they have their sweet potatoes growing, they have their tomatoes growing. So it is not something that is easily acceptable by Belizeans because we are accustomed to go to the market, right? Especially, and if you recall well, the food prices went up for the first time in 2008 in August. I remember that. I was doing a lot of research on that. I was in a position, so I had time to do research. And so that's when we realized that the price of food was going up. And then people started to complain. The complaint began from 2008, in August, September. It started to go up. And then COVID came and it just took off completely.
Yeah.
So when I was a kid, we used to go buy watermelon in Champion Ridge Village, a mile from Orange Rock. We used to buy habanero peppers, we used to buy a little cilantro, or a little cabbage, and the village's tomato, local tomato. There came a time when the villagers come to buy food in Orange Rock because the price of food was so cheap. Man, I didn't worry about it. I could go buy it and I still have change in my pocket. That has changed now. The price have gone up and everybody, oh, the price of food expensive. Well, we need to start to produce our own food. We have done a lot in producing seedlings and distributing it across the country to the villages. People have come and pick up 10, 20, 30 plants. And it's a start. But we need to accelerate and expand that to Belize City. I heard so many sad stories of people in Belize City unable to buy food, and they're buying one sausage and one
triangle cheese.
Yeah, and no, to be honest, that took me by surprise. When I said that there's no way that we should allow that.
But that speaks to the very real situation of, one, poverty. It also speaks to the impact of inflation in real time. Because if you're looking at a percentage of the Belizean population that is below the poverty line, and you're looking at the fact that the cost of the very basic food items has gone up, then you can appreciate that to have a meal, that person may not be able to afford the entire pack of hot dog sausages. They go for retail. They take one egg, one sausage, and God knows it by now they open the pack bread and try to sell your slices of it as well too. I mean, that's how bad or how dire the situation has become.
Well, there are a number of reasons why I believe this is happening. And if you look at the statistics, and I think you can all appreciate that the unemployment rate has gone down tremendously. I mean, the amount of people that are working today, right?
That's an arguable point, but I'll allow you to proceed.
And if you look on the streets, look over the September celebration, so many people out in the streets buying and purchasing. And I stand outside the store and I say, my gosh, but how is this? I said, things bad. And you can see people rushing and buying and spending. You can see the economy flowing, right? Now, how much?
It feels like an illusion, Minister. It feels for some reason, I mean, and I hate to interject, but just as a citizen of this country, as someone who resides in Belize City, I can agree with you that wherever you look, people seem to be buying and spending and enjoying the moment, so to speak. But it all seems to be a facade, because behind that mirror, behind that smoke screen, you have real life situations where people are struggling. And as a journalist, as someone who's on the ground dealing with these situations, I can see it firsthand. The same way how I can see people spending and doing this and that, I'm also seeing abject poverty. Sorry.
And I think we will always see that. It matters because there are reasons for abject poverty. There are reasons for that. One, you really can't get a job. Can you? That's the question. Can you really not get a job? Or what are your priorities as a family? What are priorities? Is it food or something else? Is it education or something else? I have people come to me at times and say, school reopen, and I'm going to buy one exercise book for my kid. And then I think, I say, hold on, but you are employed. Your husband is employed in Belize City, and you are employed doing domestic. So how is it that you are unable to buy one book for your child? I think as Belizeans, we have to be responsible and we have to prioritize.
That's a fair point.
The water boards in the villages are $7 per month. And if someone comes to me and says, listen, they say, I can cut off my water because I don't pay for 2 years. right? And I said, because COVID is done. Over. People are working. How can you say to me that you have been unable to pay $7 for 2 years? So there are many reasons. I do not say that this is the reason, but there are many reasons that as Belizeans we have to be responsible and we have to prioritize what we want to do. Because abject poverty will always exist. It matters no matter how good your economy is, there are people who will always be in that category, which is a sad thing. Now, how do we get them out of this? How do we get them out of this? What do we do? Can we help them? Someone said, give them food every month. Is that something sustainable? I don't know. But from the agriculture point of view, I am prepared, and I said to him, I am prepared to work with you to help develop some city gardens, and let the people get involved. The example of Brazil, huge city, the favelas, the famous favelas, infamous favelas.
Favelas of Rio.
Yeah, of Rio. I mean, the Brazilian government started to get them to produce their own food in the city. That works. So if it works for these big cities, it can work for us, right? It is a way to find solutions. Because we can stay here all day and argue that that one the poor, that one can buy pack bread, that one, but that doesn't solve the problem. How do we help solve or mitigate those problems? From Minister for Agriculture, as a Minister of Agriculture and responsible Minister of Food Security, I believe that creating gardens in cities can alleviate. It will not eliminate, we will never eliminate, but we can alleviate.
All right, well, Minister, we just about ran out of time. I'd say we could ask one last question as it relates to a story that we aired last night about the sugar scares that people are talking about. Could we get your comment on that?
Okay. There is let me put it this way. Sugar cane production went down by 30% in Belize. Guatemala also had a decline in their sugar production, and Mexico had a slight decline. Put that aside, the price of sugar on the Guatemala market and on the Mexican market have always been higher than in Belize. In Belize, we have a controlled price of sugar. With all the inflation and all the increasing costs of production, that price still remains. So the Guatemalans look over to it and say, hell, that's a hell of a deal they got in Belize. And so the government does not sell sugar. The only authorized sugar exporter at this time and manufacturer is BSI and Santander. They have identified certain wholesalers and they sell sugar to them. These wholesalers now, some of them are Chinese, sell to other Chinese, sell to other stores. But then the Guatemalans come in and then they buy bulk and take it out. So if I'm the Chinese owner, store owner, and I have a supply from BSI, and the Guatemalan come to my store, I have 100 bags, and the Guatemalan say, I want to pay you
X amount for the
$7 more or $8 more for the bag because it's still cheaper than Guatemala. The Chinese will sell it. So the key here is to increase the price, but that also then puts the consumer in a difficult position. So the right thing, the easy thing to do was raise the price. Then the farmer would benefit, the industry would benefit more, and the sugar will stay in Belize because then you can't take it across easily because the price will be the same. But then that puts the consumer and the industrial user at a disadvantage. So it's not an easy fix, but we need to, in this very short term, decide how are we going to fix this problem. BSI is not customs. Ministry of Agriculture is not customs. and we have porous borders,
Yeah.
right? So the Guatemalans and the Mexicans, as a matter of fact, we have cars coming in daily that they want to buy sugar from Belize. Obviously, it's cheap, it's giveaway, right? So you buy it here and you sell it for 2 times, 3 times the price in Guatemala. Isn't that a hell of a business, right? So it's not an easy fix. The solution, people would say, just raise the price.
But then we'd complain about the price.
Exactly. So we have to be mindful of that. We don't, the consumer right now is not in a good position in terms of inflation. So you want to add to that,
Yeah.
right? Of course, the farmers on BSI will say, well, man, raise the price, let me benefit we. But at this point, the farmers or the industry is subsidizing the Guatemalans, which is sad. Which is sad. So it has to be discussed more and find different alternatives to solve the problem. But that is the real problem, is that the price in Mexico is always, what, 2 times the price here? In Guatemala is 3 times. So it's a hell of a business for them.
Yeah. Well, Minister, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your input on these different topics, and we look forward to having further sit-downs with you.
Thank you very much.
All right. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, it's all about Pharmacy Week. Don't go away.